Right, so we're going to start with the 6mm hook and the first colour, which is not pink, purple. Right, so just like with the granny square, we're going to start exactly the same way. So we're going to make our slip knot and chain 4. If your chains are a little bit tighter than mine, you can make 5 chain, or equally if yours are a bit looser, you can make 3. Just want to make a neat-ish little ring. So we're going to slip stitch again like the granny square into the first chain that we made and slip stitch through to join each end. Then we're going to pull it open a little bit to find the middle, and we're going to start with a chain 3, or if you've watched my stacked single crochet video, you could do a stacked single crochet instead. So with the loop and the hook from where we joined, go into the big space, yarn over, pull through, then you'll have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2 to make a single crochet, and then stick your hook in the vertical bars of the single crochet, trying to make sure you've got 2 strands on the top of your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and that gives you a mock-up of the first double crochet. So that will serve as a double crochet, and it looks better than a chain 3 because it looks more like a stitch, but a chain 3 will work fine as well. Okay, yarn over into the middle of the space, and we're going to make our first cluster of 3. So the stacked single crochet counts as a stitch in this case. So there's our first cluster of 3. So for this cardigan, I'm going to suggest that you chain 2 on each corner, just to give it a bit more drape when you're wearing it. Yarn over, and then we're going to make 3 more double crochets. And then chain 2 again. And then make 3 more double crochets into that ring. And chain 2. And because this is a hexagon rather than a square, we need to make another 3 clusters, because we need 6 clusters, which are going to start off the sides of the hexagons. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and again 1, 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2. Quickly count how many clusters of 3 we've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we just need 1 more. So still going into that middle space, last cluster of 3. And just make sure you have got the 2 chains in between each cluster of 3. Okay, last 2 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so if you did the stacked single crochet, you'll be able to just work into the top of that now, which is there, that little V at the top. Or you can work into the top of the 3 chain, slip stitch across, and then we can leave it there, unlike the granny square video, because we're going to change colour each row. We're going to fasten off the first hexagon at this point, and we can weave that end in later, and then you can attach your yarn for the next row in any gap. I'm just going to go for the one that's next to where I finished. So I'm going to continue with stacked single crochet, but if you'd prefer to use chain 3, that's absolutely fine. So the next colour I'm using for this colourway is it's like a sage green, which will be in your kit. Or if you're just using this video to make your own colour scheme, then whichever double knitting yarn you've chosen in whichever colour scheme you'd like to do it in is fine. Okay, so when I'm adding in a new colour, I usually just pull the new yarn through, leaving a tail. So I haven't made a loop first, and then I pull the tail to the left and hold it with the work, yarn over, and then I'm going to go in to bring 2 loops onto your hook, yarn over through 2, and then poke your hook down the centre of the vertical bars of that single crochet, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And I've worked over that tail a little bit, but I am going to just work over it again for the next double crochet, and that should hold it steady. So then I'll move that tail away and make my next double crochet, and I'll sew that tail in either at the end or after a few rows. I usually do about 4 rows and then sew in the ends, just so I don't have them all to do right at the end. Okay, so at this point we've done our 3, so we want to chain 2 because we're making another new corner. So we're going back into this space and making another cluster of 3, and we need to do that in every corner. But I'll just make sure you remember, as we skip the 3 stitches, we don't chain. So we're going to yarn over and go into that next corner. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now we're going to do chain 2 because we're in another corner. And then cluster of 3. And skip 3. And again. New corner. 1, 2, 3. Chain 2. And then 1, 2, 3. Apologies for any background noise, that's because I have to work from home. Okay, so then we're going to jump over these 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to chain 2. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to jump those 3 in another corner. So I'm sure you can recognize the pattern now. And the reason we're using a 6mm hook as well with a double knit yarn is just to give it that little bit more drape as well. So I find if we use a 4mm or a 5mm even, it can just become a little bit too stiff for a garment. Okay, the 3, but obviously if you're a tight crocheter, you might want to increase again on the size, or if you're a loose crochet, you might want to drop down a size. So just do a few rows, see if you're happy. If it looks something like mine, then just keep going or change the hook accordingly. Okay, last cluster of 3. And then we're back. So because we've ended on jump 3, we're not going to chain, and then we're going to find the top of the stacked single crochet, or you can find the top of your your 3rd chain. and then slip stitch that round together. So you can see the hexagon is starting to be formed now. So at this stage it's still staying quite flat, but what happens as you progress, the hexagon will become quite wiggly and wobbly, but that's what you want, because we're going to fold it in such a way that we're going to make the L shape. At this stage it's very hard to show you because it's such a small piece, but it will go. So that's the L shape that gives us the sleeve and the front and the back of the cardigan eventually, when we've got enough rows on there. Right, so from here on, it's going to be almost the same, but you need to put a cluster of 3 in the gap, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that first, and then I'll let you carry on with the rows. Okay, so the next colour I've used is this fuchsia pink. So I'm going to take you through this row, and then every row that comes after that will be done in the same way. So that should enable you to complete the rest of the rows. Okay, so inserting our hook in any corner, pulling through the yarn just as before. So I won't spend too much time explaining this step again. If you do manage to master this stacked single crochet, it does look a lot better on the finished garment as well. It's not as obviously different as a chain 3. So I would recommend persevering with that. Okay, so I've started in a corner, so I'm making another corner. And then we skip. This time we're skipping into this gap here, created on the last row. So this is something different than just making corners this time. But from here on, the pattern will repeat, and what you'll find is that you'll just have more side spaces appearing. Obviously you'll only ever have 6 corners, and we only chain 2 on the corners. So we've skipped without chaining into the new corner. We're doing 3 double crochets, 2 chains and 3 double crochet. Okay, so now we're in the middle space. So we didn't chain. It's looking nice already with the contrasting colours. It's just a shame all the ends that have to be sewn in from changing colour. But you know, it'll be worth it. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll skip into the side space where we only put 3. 1, 2, 3. So you'll see that it is exactly the same as the granny square. We just have more corners to work into, and obviously it becomes a hexagon. Two chain, three double crochet, another 3, and back to another corner, and we're nearly there. 2 more corners to do. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, and we're on that last corner now. So no chain and jump. 1, 2, 3, 2 chain, 1, 2, 3, and we're in that final side space there, where we're going to put the last 3. Brilliant. So that's third round done. So slip stitch to the top of the 3 chain or the stacked single crochet, just like before, through, and then finish off that round. So you can see that mine is starting to just go a little bit wobbly at the minute, but that's going to give us a great hexacardigan shape. Okay, so you can either follow the instructions on the pattern, especially if you're using the kit, or use your own method to make the next few rows. And we're going to carry on until we've got the arm depth, and then I'm going to show you what to do after that. Right, so I've now completed 16 rows. So I've been trying it on my arm as I go. So try and show you on here. If you put your arm in, you've got to put that all the way up to your armpit. So you're going to need someone to help you, I think, to decide how it fits across the shoulder, and obviously towards the end where the sleeve's going to be. So for this one, I want to add a little bit onto the length of the sleeve, but I'm not going to do that until I've joined the sleeve seam. And also, I'm happy with where it sits. Also, when you try it on your arm, you can see where it's going to sit on the front. And this is just on the bust point, which is where, for this cropped summer version that I've made once before, I know it looks quite nice. So I know I don't want to add to my front anymore, but I will need a little bit of back neck width. So I'm going to add in a few rows there. A good tip is to pin it together once you've done your 3 rows. You can even just use stitch markers, as long as you use quite a few, just to allow you to try it on and stitch marker the sleeve as well. And then you'll get a good idea of how much you need to add in. It's obviously better to have a friend to help you. It's quite tricky trying to see the back when you're wearing it yourself. So yeah, if you've got someone to help you decide from the rows you've done how many more rows you'll need on obviously each side, that's a good tip. So yeah, I don't like to be too prescriptive about the sizes on this cardigan, because the great thing about it is you can make it to fit you perfectly. Okay, so because that's what I'm going to do, I mean, you can just, if you know you want a size small medium like mine, you can just completely copy what I'm doing. If you've tried this many rows and you like the fit on the armpit, like I say, the armpit to shoulder is your most important area for it to fit at this point. You don't want it pulling up and itching, and equally you don't want it really loose and sort of the armpit being halfway down your arm towards your elbow. Okay, so because this sleeve depth is now what we want, this is what we always start with, the sleeve depth, because once we know that we want that depth, we don't want to keep adding to these 2 rows here. So nothing added here. And because we're going to, if we want any more length on the sleeve, we're going to do that after we close this seam up here, because it looks neater, you can work in the round. We won't add to this end either. So basically, for this next step, there will be 3 sides that you're not adding to, which is the sleeve seams and the sleeve end. Now, it's up to you whether you want to add some into the front as well. So if you try it on and it's not hitting the bust point, or you know you want it to be an edge to edge where it touches together at the middle, then you'll need to add onto the front as well. So what you would do is you're going to start here, adding into the back, then all the way around the hem if you're wanting it longer. Now at this point I'm pretty sure you're going to want it longer than it is on mine, because otherwise it's a bit too cropped. But again, it's up to you. If you decide you want a really cropped shrug that sits sort of where your top rib is, that's fine, go for it. You would then just add onto here and onto here. Okay, so working in rows now instead of rounds. So for me, I know I want to add some to the hem. I know I need to add some into the back, and I'm not going to add onto the front because I was okay with where that was sitting. So I'm actually going to now work down here and along here and stop there. So I'm actually only going to work on these two sides. So the best tip I can give you once you've got your sleeve decided is just close it off with some stitch markers all the way along, leaving yourself a bit of room here to add rows on to these sides. So put your last stitch marker there, and that way you will know which way around your cardigan is. And another good thing is to just put a stitch marker in the front of the side that you're working on. So this would be the left side as worn, and that'll be my front. And then obviously you're going to have a matching hexagon for the other side, and that's going to be the other side as one. So you want to put a stitch marker, just put it through one of these trebles on the front, and that way you can't lose track of which are the fronts. Okay, now this is the trickiest part, the most sort of mind-bending part of making this cardigan, so hang on in there. And obviously we're all going to be different as regards fit. I do have another video for a big slouchy version which has got a ribbed cuff on it, which is a little bit trickier to do, a few more tricky techniques in there. But if you do want to progress onto that, then there's a video available for that as well. Right, so I'm just going to determine how many rows I want to add into the back, and I'll come back to you to show you how to do that. Right, okay, so I've worked out that for the back width, to make it as the last cardigan made, I need four extra rows. On the hem, I've just put 3 because 4 was a little bit long. And as I said before, on my front, I'm not going to add anything. So I'm just going to grab the other half so you can see both sides together, more or less. And then my next job is to add into the back and the hem, and then what I'll do is I'll join the back up so it's possible to try it on. We do want to do that before we close the sleeve seams, because obviously part of the sleeve seam will be part of this added these added rows here. And especially if you are going to add to the front edge as well, you're going to end up with a raw edge at the top that you're going to need to make a part of the sleeve seam. But don't worry about that for now. I will explain that fully when the time comes. So what we're doing now is working out how many rows. Now, once you know, I know that I want 4 and 3 and nothing on the front. You might want 4, 4 and 2. So when you've put your stitch markers into your sleeve seam, so you don't get confused, and you've put your stitch markers in the front so you know which is the front, then you need to work out what you want to add onto each edge. And I would write that down, even draw a little diagram of the cardigan so that you can put back 4, hem 3, front 2. That's the reason for that is if you were adding rows to all 3 edges, your first row will go all the way around. And then if you're done with the hem or you're done with the front, let's say we're done with the front, we're only adding 1 row, but you're adding 4 rows in the back, the second row of what you've added to the back will go all the way around, but it'll stop there. Okay, so it's really important to work out how many you need and then always work around all those sides until you've got the number that you want, if that makes sense. You don't want to be working rows into the back, then rows into the hem, then rows onto the front, because obviously the first few rows you can work continuously. So for example, for mine, I want to add 4 rows in the back. So I'm going to go 1, apologies, I'm going to start in the back. I'm ignoring the front because I'm not adding to that. I want to go 1 all the way around to the hem, 2 all the way around to the hem, 3 all the way around to the hem, and the last one, because I only want to add 3 to the hem, the last one will just go down the back. Okay, hope that makes sense. So yeah, it'll be different for everyone unless you're just going to do it exactly as per my cardigan here, which works out as about a size 10, 12 UK. Okay. Right, so I've got my stitch markers in the sleeves, and now I'm going to start by adding start with the back and all the way around, to the hem. Right, so it doesn't really matter which side you start on, just make sure you know which is your back and your front. So this side, because we want the stitches to still face forwards, we're going to turn it. So obviously I'm starting on this back seam, and up to now all our rows have been facing forward the way that I've shown you how to do the rounds. So you really do want to keep that consistent, because when you see the back of the stitches, they do look quite different. So each row you do, you're going to always start at the same point instead of working in rows there and back. If you were doing it in a plain colour, you could probably get away with doing that, but it does look quite neat to do it like this. So we're going to find the chain 2 that was in the corner of that top of the back seam, and we want to put our first stitch in there. So it's always a little bit tight to get into, but that's a good thing, because it's going to keep that stitch nice and straight and secure. It's not going to wobble around if we did it into the chain space. Right, so I'm going to follow the colour sequence, because I know I want 4, I'm going to follow this colour sequence 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to start with the dark green. Okay, and then I'm going to do my stacked single crochet, but if you want you can do chain 3. So stacked single crochet, I'm starting just the same way I've shown you in the other videos, but this time into that chain, the second chain in the corner. Now I've done the stacked single crochet. You may do a chain 3, but whichever we've done, we need to chain another 1, so you'll end up with a chain 4 if you've done chain 3. Stacked single crochet chain 1 will now allow us a new gap to sit above this cluster here, but what we don't want is another cluster of 3 in this corner, because what that'll do, instead of keeping a straight edge, which is what we want now, it will send that corner going off into an increase. So we don't want to increase on this corner, we want to keep it straight. For that reason, we're just doing 1. So start single crochet chain 1, or chain 3 chain 1, or chain 4, and then we yarn over. Once we've done that, we're back to working exactly as we were before, as we're used to doing. So if you're going around 3 sides, 2 sides, 1 side, this is working as we were before. So going into the next chain space and doing our 3 trebles. So it's nothing different once you've done that first step. Okay, so what I need to do now is go all the way down there and all the way around the hem, and then I can fasten off, and I'll come back here to show you how to start the next row, which will need a cluster into this gap. And once you've done that row, it's just a matter of repeating them alternately. But as I say, I'll get this row done, I'll come back here and I'll show you how to do the next step. Right, so I've come to the last cluster of 3 of the 2 sides that I've worked on. So I've done the centre back and the hem. So I don't want to add into my front edge. Okay, if you do, you'll just carry on working as normal, and you'll end at the front edge, the neck area, But regardless of how many sides you've worked around, you're going to want to end this row this same way, no matter which corner you end in. Okay, so just as we started, we need to make a gap here. So we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to look for, again, the chain in the corner. This time around it's the first chain out of the 2, but it's just going to always be the one that's nearest to us at either end, if that helps to remember. So we've chained 1, and then we're just going to make 1 more double crochet into this chain here, and that's it for that row. So much quicker now to work around because we're not adding to 6 sides. So then we can fasten off here. And go back to the beginning of that row to start the next row. So my next colour is going to be the hot pink. Okay, so adding in the hot pink, we want to work into the top of that stacked single crochet there, because we need to make a cluster of 3, but we don't want it to go all into that gap because we'll lose this nice straight edge that we're going to need later on to make the seam with. Okay, so whereas you would normally put 3 double crochets into a gap, we're going to put the first one, which will be the stacked single or the chain 3, into the top of the chain 3 or the stacked single. Okay, so we're going to pull through. If you've done your chain 3, you want to put this loop into the 3rd chain. You'll have 1 to spare to make the gap. Okay, and then this will continue that nice crisp edge that we'll need later to make the seam a continuation of the sleeve seam. Okay, so that's my stacked single crochet. Now I don't need to chain any because I'm going to act as if it's a cluster of 3, the first one being this. So we only need to put 2 double crochets into that gap, and this is how we're going to work from now on. So the next row will be the stacked single crochet, chain 1, skip the cluster, go into the next space, but I can show you that again if you want. Okay, but it's just repetition now for how many rows that you're adding. So just be mindful of how many rows you need. And then we're going to go into the next space, just like we would when we were working in rounds. So now I need to go down those 2 sides again because I wanted to add 3 rows to the hem. So I'm going to go down both sides. This is row 2. Same for row 3, and then my row 4 will just be this back seam here. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. I'll meet you back there to do the 3rd row, and then I'm going to leave you to it for however many rows you're wanting to add. Okay, so we've come to the end of this row now, and we've got that gap we made on the row before. So we're simply going to go into that gap without chaining as we normally would, but we're just going to put 2 double crochets in the chain space and then 1 into the top of the double crochet from the row before, just again to keep that straight line along the edge. Okay, and then we can fasten that off. So now we've done both versions, if you like, of the rows, continuous rows, rows as opposed to continuous rounds. So I've shown you how to work the first one of this type of row. So the stacked single crochet, chain 1, and then we carry on as normal. And then obviously this one, the stacked single crochet, and then work straight into the space next to it with 2 double crochets. So now we're going to alternate, we're going to come back to this method. So I'll show you one more time, and then I'll just leave you to it because you'll be following your own number of rows. So the colour sequence I'm following means I'm going to use this sage green now. And we're going to push the hook into the top of the stacked single crochet or the top of the 3 chain, and make our next chain 3 or stacked single crochet in the top of this stacked single crochet. There we are. Okay, so now obviously we need to work into this next gap. So we're going to chain 1, or if you've chained 3, that'll be your 4th chain, and then straight into that space with double crochets. 1, 2, 3. So you can see the beginning of this will be my final row for the hem, and then my penultimate row for the back. So I'm going to go all the way down the back, all the way around the hem, and then on my last colour, which is purple, I will only work the back seam. Okie doke. So just continue in that way. Always remember to fasten off at that end and start again at this end if you want all your stitches to face the right way. Yeah, that's pretty much it until we come to start closing up the seams. Right, so I've finished my 4 rows on the back and 3 rows on the hem. One thing just to point out, if you're doing the same as me, don't be confused by that last row, which would have started with the space, stacked single crochet, chain 1 or chain 4, and come to this space, because that was on a corner, and then at the other end it would have been the cluster, because it ended in a space. So that's different to when we were working on 2 or 3 sides. Right, so now is the good bit. You get to join up the back seam and the sleeve seams and try it on and see if we're happy with the fit. So I'm going to show you how to do the joining on the back seam, and it's exactly the same for the sleeves up until you get to the edge here. For me, it won't make any difference, but for you, if you have increased on the front as well, I can just talk you through what to do on these rough ends here to continue joining up your neck. It is useful to have a little bit of a back neck width, even if you have increased the front. So I would say by at least 1 row each side, give yourself an extra row in the back seam, just so you've got something to act as a back neck. Okay. Right, so joining together. So we want to do this right sides together. So luckily we can see the right and wrong side of the stitching. So when we pick up the back seam, like this, we can line up the stitches. So there obviously will be exactly the same number of stitches on either side, which helps a lot. So what we want to do, we want to make quite a decorative seam, so we don't want to work through all 4 loops when we're joining the seam. We want to work through the nearest one to you on this side and the furthest away from you on that side, and we're going to slip stitch the seam together. It's much more satisfying than sewing, but if you want to sew it together, that's fine. Just make sure you're lining up the clusters so that it doesn't look strange when you've finished sewing it. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to you get a clearer idea of this. So I'm going to join it up with obviously the purple. So I've used the stacked single crochet, so I can just put my hook into the nearest side of that V that's sitting on the top. If you've used a chain 4 or 3, it would be the top of the chain 3 if you're in a gap area like this, not this one. If you're in a cluster, it will be the top of the chain 3. So either way, it's going to be the top of the chain 3. Try and pick up just 1 loop from your chain, and if you've done like me, the stacked single crochet, it's that front loop. Then you want to find the top of the stacked single crochet behind, and you want to get the furthest away loop, like that. And we're going to do the same for every stitch. Now it can be tricky. I have had students struggle quite a little bit with this, just seeing where the stitches are going and making sure each stitch is lined up with its partner, because they do all have a partner. So the easiest way to do it is by counting, and then you'll know if you've gone astray, or I'm going to show you what to look out for. So we've gone through the 2 loops, and I've just brought through a loop just to secure. This tail isn't secure yet, just as we've spoken about before. We need to sew those in at the end. But if I work another slip stitch through that same stitch, that should secure that tail for now. So that first slip stitch was just to attach the yarn. The second one in the same space was to create the first part of the seam. Okay, so the next stitch we're going to work into after this very first one, which was stacked single crochet at both sides or chain 3, is this chain here that we use to make the gap. So we're going to put our hook in there. Apologies, I picked up 2 loops. I just want to pick up 1 loop of that chain, the nearest one, and then the furthest away. On the other side, yarn over, pull through, and pull this loop through this loop. Now, as you pull the loop through, try not to really pull it tight, because it could pucker up the seam. If you try this a couple of times and you find it just keeps puckering, you probably are pulling it a bit too tight, and you might not be able to manage the tight tension that you're using. It would be a good idea then to move up to maybe a 6.5mm hook just for doing the seams, and then that will overcome your tight tension. Okay, other than that, if you feel confident, just try not to pull too tight as you pull the loop through. So now you can see we've got 3 double crochets, and we will have groups of 3 until we get to the other end. And then we want to look at the back and find the group of 3 that correspond. So this is where people get confused, because they can't see which stitch they're actually in. So if you look at these strands here, you can see that the yarn is going through them. So you know that you're already worked into there. It seems a long step to the next stitch, which I think is what confuses a lot of people, but you would be correct in putting your hook under that next strand. And then when you look at the other side, don't be fooled into thinking it's this one. That's where the yarn already is. It's this next one. So they're probably a little bit further apart than you'd expect. If you accidentally go into the same one, you'll obviously end up making 2 stitches in one, and you might end up misaligning them. Okay, so we can see that the yarn is going through that one and that one. So the next available to us are this one and this one. So front there, back there. Yarn over, pull through, pull the loop through the loop without pulling too tight. So you might have to have a few goes at this. You might find that you are misaligning a little bit to start with, but eventually you will get this. And I do recommend persevering, because slip stitching seams together is much neater, and it is more satisfying, I promise, once you get it, than sewing. Sewing can look quite clumsy and not very pretty. Okay, so that loop through that loop. So I'm just going to work my way all the way down the seam till I get to the other end, and I'm just going to fasten off at this end, and then we'll look at adding length to the hem, but first we'll look at closing up the shoulder and sleeve seam, and telling you different ways of doing that depending how many rows you added. Okay, I've come to the end of my row, which, as I said, for me ends in the cluster of 3. So I'm just going to work that last slip stitch into the front strand, the top of the last double crochet, and the back strand of its partner. Pull it through, and at this point, as long as I'm happy that it's all lined up, so if you want, you can just keep the yarn attached. Don't commit to fastening it off just yet. turn it through, and you'll see straight away whether your pairs or partners of clusters are misaligned, and you'll just need to, the best trick is to just open it out, have a good look. You'll see if it's gone wrong, it'll be quite obvious, hopefully, and then you'll know where you need to go back to. And you should probably see that you've missed one, or you've maybe put two into one space. But yeah, when you open it out like that, it helps to see. Okay, so I know that I've matched them up, which is good, happy with that. So then I can fasten off. So I've not finished off my tail ends yet, I just wanted to do this quickly to get it done for you. And then I'll fasten off all my ends just before we go on to closing up the seams on the sleeves. So just fasten that off. Oh, and this is handy now because it's a good idea to try it on at this point while you've still got the stitch markers in the sleeves, because if you decide the back is too wide and you're not happy and you want to make it smaller, or you want to add more in, it's better to do that now before you do your sleeve seams, because obviously part of this back will be incorporated into the sleeve seams depending how much you've added on the front, if you've added on the front. If you haven't added on to the front, you will just be able to close the seams using these stitches, which is always nice. It's a lot easier than joining the raw edges together, although the raw edges aren't impossible, and I can show you how to do that as well. Great, so try it on, make sure you're happy with it, and then we'll come back and we'll close up these sleeve seams. Right, so obviously you're going to want to use the right colour for whatever colour you finished on. Again, we want it to be right sides together, so I'm going to just turn both sleeves through so I don't get confused, which is easy for me to get confused. Right, so my stitch markers are still in there, not posing any problems at the moment, so I'm just going to let them stay there. And then it's probably going to be better to start from the sleeve end, because you've got stitches that match up there, and then when you work your way up to the neck, if you have added rows onto the front, you're going to have these raw edges. Well, they're not raw, but it's the side of the stitch rather than here we've got the nice tops of the stitches to work into. Here we've only got the side of the stem. So if you've ever worked into row ends, as they call it, you would be putting stitches in to here. So yes, you'll be putting your hook in here to put the slip stitches through this sort of side of the stitch, if you will, which isn't really an exact science, but I usually say 2 stitches per post usually works out quite well without pulling it up. I don't need to do that, I'm lucky, because I didn't add into my front. I can just, the sleeves will be finished with stitches that face the right way round. But for you, all you would need to do, if I can show you by sort of folding this over, that would probably work. So you'll have the stems of the stitches lined up, and you're going to put your hook in, and it will be quite tricky, it'll be a bit like working into chain, into the stem or post, just picking up a couple of loops. Try not to only pick up one, because that can make it a bit stretched and loopy. So I've just got a couple of loops from that side of that stitch, and I'll go to the opposite side, and then I'll slip stitch, pull through. Okay, so you're going to do basically what you're doing with the stitches that are available, but you're working into the sides. Now, some people say, well, which colour shall I use? Because I've got 4 different colours going on, and they painstakingly change colour, and I'm very impressed with that, but I wouldn't be bothered to do that. I would just carry on in the colour that I was using, because it's going to sit right at the top neck. It's really not going to be that visible, but if you do want to do it in the 4 different colours, absolutely go for it, that's fine. So hopefully that's enough to sort of give you the idea of how to join wherever your front comes to. Right, so for mine, I'm now going to start at this end, and I've got the matching stitches. I'm going to start in that chain there with the nearest loop, and I'm going to match it to the chain on the other side with the furthest loop. By doing the chains, it just stops you having a little bit of a split at the end of the sleeve, because when you come to work the edging, it's much nicer and easier if it's not got that split. I'll show you what I mean when we come to do that. But yeah, make sure you're working into the chains before you start working into the stitches. So I'll leave you to do that because it's just the same instruction as the back seam, but as I've just shown you here, you'll have to work into these if you've added rows on your front. Hope that makes sense. Right, so I've decided I want to add a few rows onto the sleeve, so I'm going to show you how to deal with this area when we're adding our next row. And for the sleeve, we can now work in the round. We don't have to work in rows anymore. So I'll show you a few rows just to show you how to do that. If you don't want to lengthen your sleeve, that's fine. When I do the hem edge, you'll see how to just put the edging across this bit. Because I'll work across the back seam, it'll be the same technique. Okay, so what I like to do is make sure I start and join the yarn on the underarm. Not that it would probably show, but if it is going to look a bit obvious where the join is, then at least it's underneath the arm. So I usually just choose a stitch or a gap that's on the underside. Okay, and then we're just joining into that space, a bit like we did when we were working on the hexagons themselves, joining colours into spaces. So I'm going to use the purple for this. So I'm just joining in, just like we have before on the earlier videos. Stack single or chain 3. So I'm just going to make a cluster of 3 in there. And then when I get to the split where the seam is, I will show you what to do at that point. Right, so I've come to the split or the seam, and what we're going to do, we're going to use these front loops that we left available when we made the seam to work our next cluster into. So we're not going to work into this hole or this hole, because we'll end, sorry, this hole, because we'll end up with too many clusters and the sleeve will start to flare, which you don't want. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, put your hook under the first available loop. Might be a bit tight, especially if you've sewn your ends into it like I have. And then its partner. And this also helps to just close up that bit of a split that appears. Sorry, I hope you saw that there and there. And then yarn over, pull through. So you're simply just making your double crochets into those front loops. And then another one. It will sit slightly forward, but it won't be noticeable. And then number 3. And that's quite a neat way just to pull in that split and make the next cluster of granny stitch. So ignore that gap and we'll go into the next gap. And that will keep your sleeve the same width as well. And it's quite a neat way to work into that seam. But as I say, if you don't want to lengthen your sleeve, you can use the same technique, but just with the edging, which I'll show you in the next video. So I'm sure you've probably already figured out how we're going to end the row by just slip stitching to the top of the first stitch. So similar to when we were working in the rounds of the hexagon. So I want this to still be a 3/4 length sleeve, so I am just going to put just one more row of granny stitch before I do the edgings on the sleeve. But the sleeve edgings, when you finish on a row of granny stitch, are much easier to work, and you might find that you just like the look of the granny stitch. I might even find that I won't want an edging as well as the granny stitch, because it does look quite neat. Anyway, right, so slip stitch into the top of the first stitch. Being a bit tricky, this one. There we are. Slip stitch. There we go. So that's our granny stitch row worked in the round into the sleeve end. So yeah, that is the only challenging part, is getting past that seam. But once you've done that, obviously you're just working in rounds and you can carry on. I would say to join your next round here, and if you're doing more and more rounds, just join either side. Then your seam won't wander around the front, but it's probably not really going to show anyway, but it's just in case it does, you'll have it on the underneath of the sleeve. So yeah, add as many rows as you like, and either leave this as the edge because it does look nice, or you can do the same edge that I'm going to show you for the first round of the neck and hem edge, which is just a row of half double crochets. So back to the sleeve, I just decided to add these 3 rows, and that's going to be my finished edge. So I'm not going to put an edging on there, but if you wanted to, you could do it in exactly the same way that we've done it on the neck edge and hem. But yeah, for me, that's going to be the end of my sleeve.